Phil Hellmuth is looking down at ace-10 offsuit. Pre-flop begins with a strategic setup that perfectly illustrates the kicker trouble trap, which often defines high-stakes amateur versus pro dynamics.
The other hand.
Mr. Businessman.
The businessman.
Williams
The
folds.
businessman.
I love it. I love it. Let's go.
Locks out two.
Mr. Value Bet. You just look at me like a piggy bank.
The flop falls 3 diamonds, and it couldn't have been better for Perkins. Hellmuth, despite being the pre-flop aggressor, decides to check. This is a classic small ball move from Hellmuth. He realizes his ace is a good draw and wants to let the other players define themselves before he makes a move. The turn brings the 10, the absolute doom card for this specific hand configuration. Hellmuth has now improved to top pair, but the hierarchy is brutal. Hellmuth leads out for 6,000, finally betting for value and protection now that he has connected with the board. Fishman wisely folds his deuces. However,
Min raise.
Perkins decides to ramp up the aggression. He executes a min raise to 12,000. Perkins is finally starting to snap the trap on Hellmuth, who decides to make the sticky call. The river is the 4, a complete brick that changes nothing about the hand values. Hellmuth checks, adhering to his defensive posture after being raised on the turn. He is now purely in bluff catch mode. Perkins, having committed to his aggressive line, now faces a critical value sizing decision. He fires a curious bet of 6,000.
This is just running so good.
Businessman is turning over queen-high flushes.
That's supreme donkey to you, sir.
I mean,
Woo, I was dodging that. I was dodging that ace. I dodged that ace of diamonds. Bullets were flying.
How did you flop 3 diamonds with the 2 in your hand, and then defend against 2 more diamonds coming out? How did
well,
you...
I mean, how lucky did I get? I'm check raising them all in on the flop. I had the nut flush draw, and it's the businessman, you know.
What business are you in, Mr. Businessman?
Negreanu is looking down on 10-9 suited. Shlomi opens to $475 with pocket kings, the classic early position value raise that invites dominated high cards to make mistakes. Boniati flats behind, a routine set mine that keeps the opener wide and creates a pot where overpairs are forced to play multi-way. On the button, Negreanu overcalls with 10-9 suited. He buys position against a likely overpair, keeps the pot single raised so his connected hand can realize, and preserves a post-flop story that can credibly arrive at straights and 2-pair on many middling runouts. With 3 players and deep stacks, Negreanu's plan is to control price now and fight for leverage later. The board rolls out wet and middle, exactly the texture that pressures an opener's range. Shlomi continuation bets $1,525 into 2 opponents to tax the spades and charge the gutters while protecting his likely overpair. Boniati steps aside, Negreanu continues. With top pair, strong kicker for this configuration, and position, calling is superior to raising. It keeps Shlomi's bluffs alive, avoids isolating versus the strongest value, and retains every turn card that can add equity or scare an overpair. He's now set up to maneuver without inflating the pot unnecessarily. The Queen of Hearts lands. That card is fine for kings, but improves Negreanu's believable value region to include Queen 9 and some 2-pair that could have peeled. Shlomi opts for a measured $2,125, continuing his value protection line, without bloating the pot on a card that helps the caller more than the pre-flop raiser. Negreanu calls again, disciplined and deliberate. He keeps his range uncapped, realizes equity with 10-9, and holds the option to seize the narrative on favorable rivers, or punish thin value bets with a polarizing raise. The river is the 8 of clubs, a quiet but meaningful shift that completes 6-7 and strengthens combos like 9-8 that Negreanu can absolutely show up with. Shlomi puts out a small $3,000 bet, more price setting than power, trying to get looked up by worse pairs while avoiding a big decision. Negreanu springs the trap to $12,800, polarizing himself to straights, 2-pair, or sets, and telling a story perfectly consistent with his passive turn. 10-9 is a sharp candidate. It blocks calls from Queen 9, doesn't block missed spades, and represents exactly the value holdings that beat an overpair.
Aces or kings? Can I say that, or is that illegal? Heads up. I can say what he has, but not what I have. Yeah. Okay. I'm thinking aces or kings.
I appreciate you watching this far. Could you please give this video a like? Thank you.
And Shlomi's now thinking, if you've read me for aces or kings, surely you can beat aces or kings. I have to fold.
Antonio Esfandiari is looking down at 10-4 suited. Pre-flop begins with a surprising display of loose, speculative aggression between two of the most recognizable icons in the game. Barry Greenstein, historically known for a tight, solid approach, decides to widen his opening range from late position, raising to 1,500 holding 6-5 offsuit. It is a move designed to maintain board coverage and exploit the perceived passivity of the table. However, Esfandiari is not one to let a veteran pro walk over his blinds. The flop falls a texture that acts as a complete trapdoor for the pre-flop aggressor. Greenstein has struck absolute gold, flopping top 2 pair. On such a low board, his hand is effectively the nuts. Antonio, adhering to the always be aggressive philosophy of the modern pro, obliges. He fires a continuation bet of 7,200. At this point, Antonio is telling a story of a premium overpair like pocket aces or pocket kings, attempting to fold out Barry's missed high cards or weak draws. The hand reaches a fever pitch when Barry decides the slow playing is over. He executes a powerful check raise to 21,000. This move is a definitive statement of strength. Barry is saying that he has connected with this low board in a way that beats a single pair. Most players would see this raise and find the fold button with 10 high, acknowledging that the bluff has failed. But Antonio Esfandiari is not most players. He decides to enter a leveling war, convincing himself that Barry is check-raising light to test his pre-flop aggression. Antonio decides to pull the ultimate trigger, shoving all in for his entire stack.
Oops.
Good luck, boys.
Twice? Deal.
Barry refuses to run it twice, and Antonio refuses to show.
This is the one time someone's hoping to be dealt 7 deuce. You can see Antonio's outs. He can also hit running diamonds.
A king on the turn. No help to Antonio.
Antonio's down to just those 7s and deuces or he'll be felted.
The river card for all of Antonio's dough is a 4, and Barry wins.
Nice hand.
Andy is looking down on ace-4 suited in a 3-way pot. Mariano raised to $500 with king 10 suited, and Charles 3-bet to $2,000.
Could we see a cold 4-bet? No, he's going to call, though. Mariano is going to 4-bet, though. Charles calls. Andy may be considering something.
Good call.
He just calls.
The pot is $27,000 pre-flop. They all have an equal chance for now. Let's see what the flop brings.
Oh, no! You gotta be kidding me!
Andy checks because he thinks he has the best hand. Mariano checks because he knows he has the best hand. And Charles checks because he knows he's drawing dead. The turn comes 3 of hearts, and it changes nothing for everyone.
Mariano, in a 4-bet pot, has flopped a straight flush. And Andy with the ace-high flush.
Mariano cannot check anymore with the straight flush and value bets $8,000. Charles understandably folds.
Mariano started this hand with about $300,000.
Andy raises to pot amount $35,000.
Imagine having a straight flush and getting raised.
The only way to get away from an ace-high flush is if the board pairs. In poker, the correct move doesn't always get you the win. Let's see how much Mariano is gonna bet here, and if Andy makes one of the greatest folds in poker history.
Mariano on the right side of your screen, right there, has flopped a straight flush in a 4-bet pot. $97,000 in the pot.
There's no way anyone is folding ace-high flush here.
Board does not pair, and Andy just bets $120,000. Mariano moves all in. Andy calls and shows him the ace. $611,000 pot, and Mariano can't believe it.
Hellmuth is looking down on 9-7 offsuit. He limps, which caps his range and invites someone to attack the dead money. Minieri obliges with an isolation raise using a suited king, a great candidate because it has blockers, plays well post-flop, and pushes the button on everyone who limped. Locke and Martinez come along, which pulls the SPR up and widens continuing ranges.
I get unstuck. I get off the tilt juice.
Hard to get off that tilt teat.
Hellmuth overcalls rather than 3-betting, a choice that keeps the pot manageable, preserves positional leverage against the raiser, and allows weaker holdings to realize without facing a big pre-flop decision. This texture is excellent for the pre-flop aggressor. As the only player who routinely shows up with strong King X after raising, Minieri can c-bet profitably. The small sizing pressures ace high, punishes underpairs, and denies equity to random backdoors while risking little against slow-played traps. Helmy's check calls instead of raising. That keeps bluffs firing, prevents the pot from ballooning versus the portion of Minieri's range that will not fold, and sets up a decision tree where Helmuth can choose which turns to accelerate on. Multi-way callers have folded, so we are quickly moving toward a heads-up range battle that favors the in-position player's initiative and the out-of-position player's ability to trap. The second king super polarizes things. From Minieri's seat, this is a green light to barrel because his range contains far more king X than Helmuth's limp call range. The bet around $5,300 targets exactly the hands that called once and hate life now, medium pairs and stubborn ace high, and it continues to build a pot in case he is ahead. Helmuth's second check call is strategic. Raising isolates him against very strong holdings and folds out hands that might bluff again. Calling keeps his range wider, invites another polarized river bet, and protects the times he is bluff catching with decent showdown value. From a range math perspective, once the king pairs the pre-flop raiser's value density increases, which means the out-of-position player should avoid thin raises and lean into induce lines. Nothing material completes, so Minieri retains a nut advantage and chooses a large polar bet of $17,200. That sizing asks a capped range to overdefend, and it puts maximum pressure on one-pair type catchers that arrived here by calling twice.
Oh, man.
Helmuth's final check call makes sense within that framework. He beats all the natural stabs that gave up drawing equity on the turn.
It's just unreal what happens to me at this place. I mean, I'm just so sick of it, you know? I mean, I had the best on the chart, I had the best on the river. What the is going on in this place? They do me kings versus queens,
How do you call it? I always think a
trips.
bluff. I only wait for the nuts.
Now let's see how Negreanu pushes his luck to the limit on the very next hand.
All in.
Call. All in?
Huh?
Call.
Oh, we got one. I'm happy with my hand. I had suited, I had a king. A lot going on there. You move in, I call this time anyway. I was just saying, screw it. Okay. We need a hat.
At least one heart on the flop would be good. For Daniel.
George needs the best hand to hold up to survive. The flop has a 5 and a 10 on it.
Oh, we got pairs. He's got pairs. We all got pairs. We all got 3 hearts, 3 diamonds. Pretty close race. 50-50.
Not sure the math there works, but you gotta believe it first, and Daniel really believes it.
The turn card is the 3 of diamonds.
That didn't help me at all. Quite the opposite, frankly.
5 of spades!
Oh!
Daniel wins!
That was lucky.
I just wanted clear that I clearly outplayed you in our all-in pots. Obviously.
Kid Poker is in the final.
All right. Sorry, bro. That was ugly.
Tony G is looking down at Jack-9 offsuit.
I regret it every single time.
Round of straddles is on.
5.
Raise to 5. Right.
Pre-flop begins with a fascinating clash between 2 distinct generations of poker aggression. Ethan Rampage Yao, the face of the modern poker vlogging era.
Pro.
And of course, the 2K ante, the straddle gets an incredible price here.
Super pro. Against the super pro.
However, the legendary Tony G, sitting in the straddle, is not a player who enjoys folding his territory. The flop falls an absolute statistical disaster for the veteran. Both players have flopped trip jacks, but the hierarchy is brutal. Rampage holds the king kicker, giving him a massive advantage, while Tony is the victim of a classic kicker trap with his 9. Tony G checks, adhering to a deceptive defensive line. Rampage fires a small continuation bet of 3,000 meant to induce action. Tony, sensing that Rampage might be continuation betting with air, executes a raise to 8,000. This is where the hand enters a high-level clickback war. Rampage, realizing he has the better trips and wanting to define the kickers immediately, 3-bets the flop to 25,000. Tony G, stubborn as ever and refusing to believe he is outkicked on the very first street, makes the call. The turn brings a complete brick, however, the psychology shifts as Tony G decides to seize the initiative. Instead of checking to the 3-better, Tony leads out with a donk bet for 25,000. This is a pure Tony G maneuver. He is trying to set the price or represent that he was trapping with a full house on the flop. He wants to confuse Rampage's mental model of the hand. The river is the queen, a card that puts a potential straight in play, but doesn't change the fact that both players hold trips. Tony G, having led the turn and been called, suddenly hits the brakes and checks. This is the moment Rampage has been waiting for. He realizes that Tony is likely in bluff catch mode and decides to go for maximum value. He fires a massive overbet of 110,000.
Ace king again.
He is putting Tony G to the ultimate test, asking him if his tripjacks are worth a six-figure investment. Tony G goes into the tank, his ego battling his logic. He has called every street and led the turn, and now facing a massive river bet, he talks himself into the idea that Rampage is at it with a missed straight draw or a weaker jack.
Which one is king? I raise 5-3. Queen.
And he's going to get paid off. Rampage here. Trips over trips.
Jack, yeah.